Imagine spending $400 on a smartwatch, dropping it once, cracking the screen, and being told by the manufacturer that repair is impossible, so you just have to buy a new one. Now imagine a world where that never has to happen again. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking about something that, honestly, I think most people completely ignore when they buy a smartwatch: repairability. And specifically, we are talking about how Google quietly did something remarkable with the Pixel Watch 4 that Apple has completely refused to do with the Apple Watch. Stay with me, because this is actually a bigger deal than it sounds. Let me start with a little context. The right to repair movement has been building for years, especially in the United States and across Europe. The basic idea is simple. If you bought a device, you should have the legal and practical ability to fix it yourself or take it to any repair shop you choose without being forced back to the manufacturer. In 2022, pressure from this movement became so intense that Apple, a company famously hostile to third-party repairs, had to launch its own self-service repair program, making genuine parts, tools, and repair manuals available to consumers. That was a huge moment. But it also showed how reluctant big tech can be when it comes to actually designing products with repairability in mind from the start. Offering a repair manual after the fact is very different from building the device to be repairable in the first place. And that brings us to Google and the Pixel Watch 4. Now, I will be honest, I have been following the Pixel Watch line since the very beginning, and the original Pixel Watch was a disaster in terms of repairability. iFixit, which is the gold standard for scoring how easy devices are to fix, gave the first Pixel Watch a score of 4 out of 10. That is roughly the same score most smartwatches get, which is to say, terrible. The internals were packed so tightly, sealed with strong adhesive, and designed in a way that made any repair basically a destructive process. I remember watching iFixit tear one down and physically wincing at how they had to pry apart the layers. At that point I thought, okay, Google is just like everyone else. They do not actually care. But then something changed. With the Pixel Watch 4, Google's engineering team treated repairability as what they called a North Star, a guiding principle from the very beginning of the design process. And the results are genuinely impressive. iFixit gave the Pixel Watch 4 a score of 9 out of 10. For comparison, the Apple Watch Ultra 3, Apple's most premium smartwatch, scores a 4 out of 10. That gap is enormous. So how did Google actually pull this off? The biggest innovation is something called a dual gasket architecture. Most smartwatch makers use adhesive to seal their devices against water and dust because adhesive is cheap and easy to apply on an assembly line. The problem is that once you use adhesive to seal a watch, any technician trying to open it has to destroy that seal, and there is no clean way to put it back together while maintaining water resistance. Google's dual gasket system replaces adhesive with mechanical seals that can be removed and reinstalled cleanly, while still delivering 5 atmospheres water resistance and an IP68 dust and water rating even after a repair. That is a serious engineering achievement.
The second major change is the battery design. Google switched to what they call a stacked cell battery inside the Pixel Watch 4. This is relevant because battery replacement is actually the most common reason people need to repair a smartwatch. Lithium batteries degrade over time, and after 2 or 3 years of daily charging, capacity drops noticeably. In most watches, the battery is glued in place and surrounded by other components that need to be removed first. Google's stacked design makes the battery significantly easier to access and swap out without damaging other parts.
Personally, I had a moment last year that made this whole topic very personal for me. My partner's previous smartwatch, not a Pixel, not an Apple Watch, but a mid-range Android device, died about 18 months after purchase. The battery simply stopped holding a charge. We called the manufacturer, and they told us the battery was not replaceable and offered a 30% discount on a new model. 30%. On a device that cost over $200 and died from a completely predictable, normal form of wear. I was furious. We ended up just tossing it, and that felt awful. environmentally, financially, emotionally. That moment genuinely changed how I evaluate gadgets now. Repairability is on my checklist every time. And this is not just a personal convenience issue. Electronic waste is one of the fastest-growing waste streams on the planet. According to the Global E-Waste Monitor, the world generated 62 million metric tons of electronic waste in 2023 alone, and less than 23% of it was formally recycled. Smartwatches are a small but growing part of that number. When a device is designed to be unrepairable, it accelerates that waste enormously. Google has also done something else smart here. They partnered with iFixit to offer genuine pixel replacement parts, tools, and repair guides to consumers directly. This means that if you own a Pixel Watch 4 and something breaks, you can actually order an official screen, official battery, or official band connector and repair it yourself at home if you have the skills. Or you can take it to any third-party shop that has access to the same official parts. This is fundamentally different from Apple's approach, where third-party repairs have historically involved non-genuine parts and a cat-and-mouse game with software that sometimes flags repaired devices. I'll say this, personally, after years of being deeply invested in the Apple ecosystem, this kind of move from Google genuinely makes me reconsider my position. I have 2 Apple Watches between me and my family, and I know that when the batteries eventually degrade past usefulness, we are probably just buying new ones. There is no real repair pathway. That is thousands of dollars cycling through our hands and eventually into landfill over a decade. The broader historical context here matters too. If you go back to the 1970s and 80s, consumer electronics were routinely repaired. Televisions had repair shops on every main street. Radios were modular. The shift towards sealed, disposable consumer electronics really accelerated in the 2000s as devices got thinner, more integrated, and more profitable to replace than repair. The smartphone era turbocharged this trend. Apple, with its first iPhone in 2007, set a template of beautiful, sealed, replacement-oriented hardware that the entire industry followed for nearly 2 decades. What Google is doing with Pixel Watch 4 is, in a small but meaningful way, pushing back against that entire trajectory. And look, I want to be fair to Apple here. They have made real improvements with iPhones. The iPhone 16 series earned a 7 out of 10 from iFixit, which is genuinely better than it used to be. But the Apple Watch remains stuck in the old paradigm. And with Apple Watch Ultra 3 sitting at a 4 out of 10, it is hard to argue that Apple is taking repairability seriously for wearables. I will be very curious to see whether this influences buying decisions at scale. The Pixel Watch 4 retails starting at $349 for the 45mm version, which puts it in direct competition with the Apple Watch Series 10, starting at $399. The specs are competitive, the health features are strong, and now repairability is a real differentiator. That is a meaningful package. So here is my question for you. When you buy a smartwatch or any expensive gadget, does repairability actually factor into your decision? Or is it something you only think about after something breaks? Drop your honest answer in the comments below. I read every single one of them. And if you want more content like this, real analysis, not just spec sheets, hit subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel grow and keeps these videos coming. See you in the next one.